Hello, my LGBTQTs, and welcome back to another very special episode of A Jaded Gay, part 2 of the Best of Guests for 2024. I hope you're excited. Just to give you a quick heads up, this will be the last of it for 2024. I'm going to take a little winter break, so I'm planning on coming back with new episodes in February of 2025. Don't worry though, I won't be completely gone. You'll still be getting blog posts every week. There's going to be bonus episodes for December and January, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I thought we'd close out the year with part 2 of highlighting some really great guest insights from this year's episodes. So hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's get into it. I am excited to bring on a true queen today. She is Philadelphia's Queen of Comedy and the 2019 Drag Queen of the Year. Please welcome Bev. Hi, Bev. How are you today?
Hello. Lights, cameras, me without a stitch of makeup on. Hello. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us today. Drag also has a strong connection to LGBTQ plus rights and activism. For example, during the Stonewall riots, drag queens rioted against police repression of queer venues at Stonewall in 1969, and they risked their safety to march at the earliest pride parades over the years that followed. And then throughout the AIDS crisis, they raised funds for research and support services while they and their friends died from the disease. So how do you see drag intersecting with activism today?
Drag, I think, has always been and will need to continue to be political. Dealt with a situation within the last year where I had to sever a relationship with a bar here in Philadelphia that I had worked at for 10 years because they tried to censor a performer from doing a number in support of Palestine. They were a second generation Palestinian immigrant. And I personally am pro-Palestine, but I get that there are those that are not. But I don't think it's the place of a bar owner or bar management to be policing what statements can or can't be made in their, just in general. And that particular situation, that owner said to us, he's like, I just don't want anything political in my building. I was like, do you understand that there wouldn't be a gay rights movement without, nowadays, they would be referred to as trans women. Back then they were considered transvestites or drag queens. But like, if it weren't for Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson actually beginning the Stonewall riots, we wouldn't have the modern gay rights movement. You can't tell a room full of performers that they can't do anything political. I think that now with what's going on in the world, yes, I approach things from comedy, but I still do things poking at those in power that are keeping us down and are establishing laws and sanctions that are meant to keep us down. And I think that it is important for drag performers as artists to continue to resist that and comment on that and keep it visible, because what you're seeing on the news doesn't reflect that. You have to get that sometimes from art, because you're not going to get it from quote unquote non-biased journalism. And drag, while it can be scapegoated, it also is it is scapegoated because people are putting themselves out there for the purpose of being visible.
Over the past few years, we've seen a rise in drag bans and anti-drag legislation, claiming that drag is such a threat to children. So can you tell us more about that?
Sure. I think it's all a distraction. It's if we cared about children and we cared about protecting them, then we would have banned guns 20 years ago. You can't say that you're worried about the safety of your child when a child has never been killed at a drag queen story hour. A child has never been killed at a drag show. Lots of them have been killed in school shootings. And I'm not going to talk about religion or the church or anything, but as far as the protection of children, they're not exactly protected there as well. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors and, oh, look over there, to deflect from a lot larger political issues. Last summer with the drag bans and with like places pulling sponsorships and pulling pride relationships, it's it all comes down to money, unfortunately, and who's paying the bills and who's not. And it's a lot easier to look at a marginalized community who you think is passive and not going to fight back. And that's why shows like We're Here on HBO and things like that are out there and like actively resisting that type of viewpoint.
I am very excited to welcome our next guest. He is my good friend and realtor. He helped me find my house, and he's always winting. Get what I did there? Winning, winting. Please welcome Ryan Wint. Hi, Ryan. How are you today?
Great, Rob. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for coming on the show today. Very excited to have you come on and share all your house hunting knowledge with us. What advice would you have for someone who's considering buying a house but doesn't know where to start or if they can even afford a down payment?
I mean, I think we answered some of those questions. So now it would be step one, listen to Jaded Gay podcasts. But no, seriously, I mean, it's never too early to start the conversation, reach out to your friends, brothers, aunts, whatever, who's a real estate agent, reach out to me, and just kind of get that conversation going. I would also recommend starting a conversation with a lender. It's, again, never too early. They can soft pull your credit, and if there are flags, they can give you advice on what you should fix. I would say get a handle on your credit, get a good understanding of where you're at financially according to the credit bureaus, and yeah, obviously put some money away. Like I said, if we can, I've had buyers purchase with less than $10,000, but it doesn't always happen that way. There are a ton of grants and assistance for down payment programs that we can see if buyers qualify for. But again, that's all things that we would talk about in a consultation and, get all your questions answered. So definitely develop your questions and reach out to anybody that you trust to go through this process with.
He is the program manager for the Louisville Pride Foundation, a licensed social worker, and a god among men when it comes to advocacy work. Please welcome Anthony Munger. Hi, Anthony. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Rob?
Doing very well, thank you. I'm glad to have you on the show.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
On top of the resources you were talking about, it seems like there's quite a few activities focused on training drag performers and queer influencers to be community health workers. So can you tell us more about that and the importance of LGBTQ plus healthcare awareness?
This is just pure, unadulterated queer joy for me. There's one thing that we got to write into the grants is that we would have drag queens and LGBTQ influencers become community health workers, which means they take 40 hours of training in community health with a certified class, and then they take an additional 8 hours in mental health first aid. Then they are certified through the state to be community health workers. So once they do that, they can go on stage, use their platforms, and this includes social media, to do PSAs, where whenever they talk about my vaccine program or the HIV program or the harm reduction, even if they do it for a minute, I can pay them $100 of Kentucky's money. And it just delights me that with, and this is almost every state, but every legislative session, they try to cancel drag queens and trans people. And I found a way to take that state's money and pay drag queens and trans people and a few cisgendered individuals directly. Also, having that community health worker training gives them a little foot in the door for community leadership. And when next February comes around and we have another legislative session and another 14 bills, which, mind you, we killed them all this last year. Absolutely none of them ended up being heard or passed. But when they come around again, the drag queens are not just clowns. They're not just performers. They're not, they are people that are trying to help you and save you. They're trained in diabetes management, they're trained in cardiovascular health, and they can help empower people to have better conversations with their doctors and advocate for themselves and make decisions on themselves. Especially when you get into rural Kentucky, decisions are made for oneself based on what the community believes and what your family believes. And very more often than not in rural Kentucky, there is no one else that is LGBTQ, or there's just a couple of people. So people end up making decisions that aren't necessarily for them. So that's where my CHWs, my drag queens say, hey, did you know you're at a higher risk of this? Do you know that this happens? You know, you can take better care of yourself, or you're feeling lonely. This drag queen is someone that you can talk to and someone that can connect you and bring people in. And even if they don't end up coming to one of our vaccine clinics or getting testing for HIV, they will come in for a movie night, because just being around other queer people where there's no expectation to even be looked at, you just look at a TV and have fun and have popcorn. It's very liberating for a lot of people. So I am very, very proud of that. Very.
He is a runner and researcher and here to talk about his experiences as a gay man with autism. I'm very excited to welcome my friend, Max Corden. Hey, Max, how are you today?
Hi, Rob. I'm doing well.
Thank you for coming on today to talk about a very important topic. Very excited to have you share your insights. How do your experiences of having autism and being gay intersect and influence each other?
So I think, like I said previously, there's a lot of like hidden like agendas and rules with, being gay and certainly gay dating that I just don't like. I've had to like learn on my own. They didn't really come natural to me. So that is really hard. I think whenever I tell prospective dates that I'm autistic, there's a lot of like surprise because gay men, they have this like vision in their head about like what someone with autism looks like. And that can be, their first response is like, oh, I'm really surprised that you have autism. I would have never guessed. And I feel like sometimes, like, not all the time, I feel like whenever I tell, guys I'm dating or like other acquaintances that I'm autistic, there's like some, in infiltrating, like they almost try to treat me like I'm a bit of a little kid because I think they don't want to like, ruffle any feathers. So that can be like, a little bit difficult to navigate. But usually like sometimes like I just like ask like my friends for advice. I'm also, I have a life coach and he like gives me some like, ideas, and he gives me some ideas and like recommendations of how to date. But, I'm a researcher by trade. That's like what I do for my day job. And I'm like, I wish there were kind of like some best practices on how to date, but dating is so like, it's so it's such a fluid system. And when you're like neurodivergent, you tend to think in very like black and white terms. So it can just be a very like challenging process.
He makes queer art for theme parks. Please welcome Jacoby Nordberg. Hi, Jacoby. How are you today?
Hey there. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for coming on today to talk to us about all things queer art.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. How important is it for you to create visibility for LGBTQ plus issues through your art?
Well, that's very important. I mean, even just being a representative, being a person in the room who is queer, and to know that person was on the team or the project, that in itself is very important, to have that voice or that working hand. If it's a big project that we're working on in the parks, even just being that voice in the room or knowing that someone is doing that is something that maybe like the 7-year-old self of me would be like, oh, so I can do that, you know? Um, Even though my job is sometimes, most times, not a thankless job, you would say, because it's kind of unknown. We're just kind of in the background, we're in the crew. But in my like gallery fine artwork, I mean, yeah, like I said, in my personal work, it's very important to have that person in the room, that work in the gallery that is surrounded by other pieces. That's like, oh, this person's queer, but it's not, you know, it's not like a new thing or a surprise that, oh, a gay guy's painting. Like, wow, okay, alert the news. But no, it's always great, especially if the representation is in the work or talking about a subject that's not maybe talked about a lot, like maybe at the intersection of being a person of color and queer, or someone with a disability and queer, or in a state that is not known for being very queer, or a country that's not known for being very queer focused or representative. Yeah, very, very cool.
And what advice would you give to young LGBTQ plus artists who are just starting out?
I would say find the mentor, find the person that's even someone your own age. Like find someone that is in your space online, no matter where, you know, where you are. Find someone that you can just share your work with, bounce ideas back and forth, keep that journal, keep that Pinterest board, whatever you need to do, your TikTok collection, whatever it is. But to even have one person as community, so like even to find that one person that might be your same age or older and gone through it, to have that mentorship between two people is very, very important. Because you might be seeing one thing one way and they could see the other way, and that goes for the life stuff too. Like you might be like, oh, I don't know how to come out, or I don't know when to come out, and you're overthinking it, or you're need to take a step back or whatever. Like definitely find a person that can help you grow and learn from.
I am very excited to bring on today's guest. He is a singer and host of The Carmine Davis Show. Please welcome Carmine Davis. Hi, Carmine. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. I'm very excited that you're joining us today, a fellow podcaster and also a pop musician. So lots of fun things to talk about there. In what ways do you think pop culture and pop music can be a force for positive change for the LGBTQ plus community?
I think it always has been. You know, from the days when I look like Patti LaBelle is another one of my huge inspirations. And back when they were Dolly Parton, and they were very vocal about the AIDS epidemic, and how that and that pushed the narrative of like making shows like the Golden Girls or Family Matters address those issues that were going on in pop culture, and while we treated people so horribly, right, for dealing with something that was happening, like this was happening to them, not because of them, and it changed the way people viewed it. Still, there's stigmas and all that towards it, but it changed the way people looked at it and related to it. And I think to now, where that we need to just drive that point home, you know, of queer spaces. And luckily now people like RuPaul and all that, you have drag queens and all those things in your room at any time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it helps now with political, like where we're at a political standstill for women's rights, LGBTQ rights. I think they're going to remember Carmine Davis when it comes to voting and being like, oh, that boy brings a light to my life. Like, I want to see him do well. I believe that. I think they're going to look at Rob and be like, oh, he's so smart, and he's, you know, all these things, and he's as inspiration to me. He made me want to create a podcast. And so when it comes to defending him, everybody's not going to be there, and everybody's not going to do that. But because of pop culture, because of platforms that we have, like now we're able to tell our stories, we're able to talk, we're able to spill tea, we're able to have these exchanges just like everyone else. I think it's going to push us to the point where people are, I believe it. I don't think it's not going to happen. I think that we are going to be better for it.
He is a New York Times best-selling editor at Penguin Random House and curator of the publisher's LGBTQ plus network. Please welcome Alexander Rigby. Hi, Alexander. How are you?
Hey there, Rob. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on today. In recent years, we've seen an increase in censorship and book bans related to LGBTQ plus literature. You've talked about Penguin Random House working at the legal level to prevent some of these book bans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that work?
We actually have a banned books site, which people can check out to see what we're doing at the legal level that Penguin Random House has posted about, as well as the PRH LGBTQ plus network. So that banned books website gives information to people about how to email your representatives to talk to them about book bans and how to fight back against them. It gives information about writing letters to schools and local press, directions on how to report censorship and to fight back against it, as well as figuring out what else is going on in your community. There are resources to learn about how to support your child if they identify as part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So that banned book site is something that Penguin Random House has put together as sort of a resource to explain all the different things we're doing as a publisher to fight back against book bans, as well as giving readers some resources and recommendations for what they can do, at the more local level and just as individuals to fight back against book bans. So I think that website is a nice source of information.
How does Penguin Random House handle issues related to LGBTQ plus diversity and representation in its publishing and editorial decisions, especially as it relates to supporting LGBTQ plus authors?
I think, publishing has unfortunately notoriously not been super diverse in the past. I think I kind of mentioned this in terms of just location wise with in the past, New York City being kind of the epicenter for publishing in the US. I think that really made some people not able to work in publishing just because the cost of living in New York City is so high. So not only in terms of being able to have more remote workers now in different parts of the country, I think that really opens up people of all different backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, sexual orientations to be able to work in publishing. But PRH is a super queer-friendly workplace. In all of our guidelines, there's no tolerance for any kinds of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, any of those kinds of things. So it's a very queer friendly publisher, which is great. And then it's also just been great to see, even in the few years that I've worked here, queer and LGBTQ plus publishing is actually one of the portions of publishing that is on the rise. And we're actually publishing more and more queer books, which is so exciting to see because there has been more, over the past few years, and they've been doing well kind of across the board. So I think it goes to show there's really a desire for more queer titles, and not only for other queer people to read, but all different kinds of people enjoy reading queer stories. So I think there's been an investment for editors to acquire more titles by writers who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, which I think is really important. As I mentioned, I really try to seek out and encourage writers who identify as part of the community to submit to me. I have a couple queer authors that I've published books by. One was Gay Science by Rob Anderson, which was a New York Times bestseller, which was a lot of fun to work on. And I have a couple other ones coming up soon. So I think really just prioritizing it and making sure that our lists of titles are as diverse as possible in kind of all of the different categories, and making sure those stories are heard.
He is a prominent gay psychologist and recent author of Boy from the North Country. Please welcome Dr. Jason Durant. Hi, Jason. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. I think this is a really great topic that we're going to be talking about, since almost every podcast episode has some tie into mental health. So very important to discuss. And your book, which we'll get into as well, is a great immersion into mental health within gay men, especially from a first person point of view and your own personal experiences. Reading through it, a lot of the book resonated with me. I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of the gay readers out there. But one line that really jumped out to me was on page 138. You write, falling in love with a man who could never love you is never going to go smoothly. And this is something I've experienced, especially when I first came out. And it's interesting because I've been transcribing some older podcast episodes, and I recently transcribed one from January of 2023 called Are You Emotionally Unavailable? And I forget who said it, but one of the articles that I cited in that, the author said something along the lines of, falling in love with an emotionally unavailable man is one of the worst things you can do for your mental health. And I think it's a trap that so many gay men seem to fall into at some point in their dating journey. So why do you think that is, and what kind of impact can this have on a gay man's mental health?
That's a big one. There could be a book about that one sentence there. I mean, I have experienced it multiple times. In fact, my earliest relationships were sort of a string of those experiences. Almost every client that's come into my office and going on 15 years in private practice has at least one or two stories about that experience. And I think there's two pieces to it. I think as men, emotional unavailability is kind of trained into us a lot of the time. We're not supposed to be vulnerable. We're not supposed to be allowing ourselves to be impacted. We can't appear too caring. So there's that side of it. And then there's the side of us who maybe is a little desperate to be loved, but isn't quite ready. So finding someone who's doing that emotional unavailability thing sort of fits the bill. It feels like love because maybe we grew up feeling that love was always a little unrequited. And I think a lot of gay men relate to that just because of the nature of being in the closet and the shame and all of that. We find people, and it's a little bit sad when you think about what's going on there. I think a lot of the time is we're actually afraid to really be loved. So we seek out these relationships with people who are not able to do it for one reason or another. Maybe they're not in love with us. Maybe they're heterosexual. Maybe they're just not that into you, whatever it is. And then we find ourselves repeating all of that self-loathing and re-traumatizing ourselves. And it's very impacting because people will talk about being in those kind of situationships or even delusionships for years. And it affects their performance, it affects their self-esteem, it affects their productivity. I mean, it's a pretty serious and under-discussed topic. I'm not saying it's unique to the gay community. I'm just saying it's very common in our community.
And with that in mind, I am very excited to welcome our next guest. He is a horror tuber and podcaster who likes it on the spooky side. Please welcome Bobby Torres. Hi, Bobby. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for coming on. I'm very excited for this episode. Like we were talking about before we started recording, I've just been for so long now in the Halloween mood, and we're finally here. So I'm excited to join another horror lover to talk all things spooky. What would you like to see in the future of queer horror?
Queer horror, like I mentioned earlier, like just, us and more of the spaces in the writer's room, more people like us, and when I mean like more people like us in these roles, like main characters centered around us. Like we shouldn't always be the supportive friend or the neighbor or the sacrificial person. Why can't we be the main character? So that's why I give like Fear Street some props, because the main character in that one is queer. But I can't really name too many that I know of that where the main character is queer, especially in mainstream horror. So yeah, I want to see more of that, because why the hell not? Like we have stories too, for sure. And there's some movies out there. There's some low budget ones. There's one that I think I mentioned to you and Travis when we were out, called Midnight Kiss. There's that one that's on Hulu. That one's a lot of fun. Predictable, but it's gay as fuck. There's another one called Spiral. Not the Saw Spiral, but there's one called Spiral with Jeffrey Boyer Chapman. He's a real queer person, and he hosts RuPaul's Drag Race Canada version, and I think he was also on a gay film called The Skinny. Not porn or anything. It's just a group of friends, gay film, whatever, fun. Anyway, he stars in this. He has he's in an interracial relationship. His partner is white, and he has a daughter. And they moved to this new town. And you've seen this before, have you? Did you see Spiral?
Yeah, I forgot the name of it, but as you're talking through this, I did watch it in the past couple weeks with my friend.
Okay, and they were like gaslighting him and making him like crazy, doing all these things. It was like a cult involved. So yeah, it was cool to see that representation. I just hated how they did certain things in that movie. But yeah, it's just like I want to see more things like that. Just because again, that character was in the forefront, main character, but like mainstream. Like I want more people to experience it. And even if it's not mainstream, like can we talk about it more? Like if the movie's good, let's just get it out there where everybody's talking about it. Cause that's how some movies become cult classics. Like when those movies came out, nobody didn't talk about them. Nobody probably didn't care about them. But now today, everybody's obsessed. They love them. So why can't we do the same thing today with like the newer ones? We're still stuck on the old ones. So yeah, I want to see more of that. I want to see us more front and center there. Story set around us for a change, because again, we are people. We have lives. We have interesting things going on with us. So yeah, I want to see more of that.
He is an acclaimed horror journalist, award-winning playwright, and creator of Gay of the Dead. Basically, he is a berry buff horror buff. Please welcome Sean Abley. Hi, Sean. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm ready to unjade you on your podcast.
Perfect. That's the point of having guests on, trying to, heal the jadedness here.
Yay. Well, I'm here. I'm up for the job.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to have you on for our very special Halloween episode this year. What would you like to see from the genre going forward?
I think that really, I don't know if I want anything specific. I think it's just, so the horror genre is unique in that the fans are the filmmakers, are the journalists, are the, it's the one genre where everybody can be everything and remain everything else. Like the fan can become the filmmaker and remain the fan, can then become the journalist, like can become the, the academic. And so we can create stuff in our ecosphere. And I think as we do that, obviously people come into it from the outside as well, and that's fine. But I think what I would like to see is that we continue to ask for more. I am not averse to a popcorn movie or some dumb low budget something, gore for gore's sake. I love all that stuff. And it definitely is, part of my horror movie diet, but I also love this sort of art house stuff that's coming out right now. And, I loved In a Violent Nature and Skinamarink and, these types of films that really, when we say push the boundaries, I don't mean like an extreme gore. I mean in like what you think an audience will put up with. And I think that's good for our, it's very easy. One of the things that is sad but true is that making a horror movie is like the easiest way into Hollywood. And it's one of the easiest ways to get your film seen because there's a built-in audience for it. And we, as a community, have proven that we will consume like the cheapest shot on your iPhone made for $5 horror movie offered to us. And so there can be a temptation just to get in on it, right? That's fine. But I hope that we will also make sure that we let the like Jordan Peele's of the world know. I'm dropping his name like he's got any worries in the world, but letting the people like that make the Skinamarink and the In a Violent Natures know that we appreciate what they're doing. And so not only will they make more, but other people will see that and be like, oh, well, I've got this idea that I was worried that maybe wouldn't land because it's a little too like nuanced or esoteric or whatever. I'm going to give that a shot. That's what I would like to see.
And how would you encourage listeners to get involved in the queer horror community?
Well, like I just said, the fans are the filmmakers, are the journalists, are the academics. Like, we do everything. So just be part of it. Just pick a lane. You don't have to stay in that lane, but just pick one. If you want to make a movie, make a movie. There are filmmakers that I've talked to, notably Joshua Pangborn and the Monster Makeup guys, who wanted to make a movie, had never made a movie, didn't know about making a movie, but made a movie, and they're having success. So just sort of, not just sort of, just be part of it, honestly. Now, it will be, there are some brighter lights of the horror community that may seem unattainable, or it may seem a little cliquey or what have you. But, I think that there are other tables besides the cool kids table that you can sit at. And that's where sometimes the more interesting people are. So yeah, just if you are a person who loves horror, especially if you're queer, where, the horror community is very welcoming to queer people, just like jump in somewhere and then you'll find it.
He is a photographer and host of the MLVC podcast, The Madonna Podcast. Get ready to get into the groove. Please welcome Stefan Marechko. Hi, Stefan. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to have another Gay Icon series here. I did a few last year, but this is the first main one that we're doing for 2024, right towards the end of the year. I think it's very fitting to bring you on as a special guest because we have a lot to cover with the Queen of Pop herself, Madonna.
Madonna.
Yes, the prototype for many of our modern day pop stars here.
For sure.
Why does Madonna's music resonate so much with gay men?
So I don't know if it's necessarily just the music. I think maybe the music was the avenue with which gay men sort of saw her. I mean, obviously her music and her music videos were sort of what draw attention to her, but she's strong. She's assertive. She's very outspoken. She knows what she wants. She's not afraid to be sexual. She's always featured beautiful men in her videos and on stage. She's fashionable. I think all of those traits sort of is what, gay men are, what resonates with gay men. She's a strong woman. She's beautiful. I remember as a high school kid, I wanted to dress exactly like her male dancers in her Vogue video. I was like, I want to wear that. Not dressed as Madonna, but as the male dancers. Like, I wanted to look as sharp as they did in those suits.
Hey, I'm not opposed to wearing a cone bra every now and then. So, going off of that though a little bit, years ago I read this book called Straight Jacket by Matthew Todd, and 2 years ago when I started the podcast, I did an episode on pop queens and their emotional appeal to gay men. And in that book, I cited that research for that. In the book Straight Jacket, Matthew Todd explains that pop queens typically appeal to gay men through one of four categories, which he kind of identified. And these include an assertion of aggressive sexuality, escape through music, empowerment / I'm too good for you, and I'm not good enough for you / victim. Mm-hmm. So how do you see Madonna's discography paralleling any of those themes?
And thank you for providing those in advance, because I was like, I had to give that a little bit of thought, because I was like, So, and I do feel she does sort of cover off a couple of those themes in some of her music. So an assertion of aggressive sexuality, that one's super easy. She's had music from the very beginning, like Physical Attraction, which is a killer early Madonna song. It's so good. Obviously Justify My Love, Erotica. On her Rebel Heart album, which came out 9 years ago, there was, a song called Sex. So she's constantly sort of like in that sexuality. It's in your face. It's there. It's kind of hot, it's kind of sexy. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is, but, so that she ticks that right there. The second one, Escape Through Music. Madonna has, hands in the air, like carefree, anthemic dance music, you know, like her very first single, Everybody. Then there's, of course, Holiday, Into the Groove. She had that song come out, I think it was 2009, called Celebration. So there's always these sort of like carefree, I mean, on Confessions on a Dance Floor, she had Get Together. You know, like there's songs about just like being free because of music or because of dancing. The empowerment, I'm Too Good for You. I think the first song that came to mind, I was like, She's Not Me, off of her Hard Candy album, where she's basically saying, you know, like, well, you might have that girlfriend, but she's not me. I'm better than her. And on her Rebel Heart album, she has Living for Love, which is all about like, you know what? I fell down, but I'm going to pick myself back up. I'm going to put my crown back on my head, and I'm going to keep on going. So, and I think a lot of her songs sort of fit in that, where it's, you know, like definitely empowerment, like express yourself, you know, where she's talking about, you know, don't go for second best, you know, like it's respect yourself, basically. And the final one you said, I'm Not Good Enough for You / Victim. So I don't think I could be wrong. I didn't like deep dive on like every single song, but Madonna doesn't usually play Victim in any of her music. I think the closest I could think of for that would be off of her Like a Prayer album. She has a song called Oh Father. And I think in Oh Father, I mean, the video more so than the actual content of the lyrics, which is her portraying a person who was in a abusive relationship and trying to escape that. So I think, you know, or like in her erotica album, she has Bad Girl, where she talks about, you know, like, I've smoked too many cigarettes today. I'm not happy when I act this way. I think that's sort of maybe like the closest you can kind of get to that. But for the most part, she never really sort of tries to sing as if like, I'm a victim. I mean, she has Rescue Me as a song, which I always thought was a strange song for her lyrically and message wise, because that's the only song where she's ever been like, someone please come rescue me, you know, like help me. Because I think Madonna has always been very proud of taking care of herself, you know, and I think that's sort of been her overall message. But yeah.
I'm very excited to introduce our next guest. He is the founder of Gay Wellness. Please welcome Peter DeWitt. Hi, Peter. How are you today?
Hi, Rob. I'm well, thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited to have you come on to tell us all about gay wellness. I think it's a very important topic we cover in a lot of our episodes, but especially as we're coming up on the holiday season. So tons of great stuff there. Can you tell us what your own personal definition of gay men's wellness is?
Yeah, I just think it's an ethic. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of being, of making choices moment to moment that are trending and pointing towards an internal sense of goodness, feeling good in your body. So whether it's eating good food, relaxing your body through some kind of like therapy, or like exercising your body, you know, or like, you know, working your mind and your emotions and working out your issues. These are all things that point towards a feeling of wholeness and of goodness and health. And on all levels, on mind, body, spirit. It's really so. I think it's a lifestyle. It's like brushing your teeth. You have to make things habitual. So that we have to make these things habitual, so that we don't make other things habitual that are escapist and that are like numbing and that are ways of escaping and, you know, avoiding the pain and the suffering. We all have pain. We all have suffering. So, you know, it's a lifestyle of choosing, you know, moment to moment things that are better for us. And by the way, I'll be 100%. I'm not like Mr. Wellness over here. Like, I'm not like, I do like to have a few drinks every now and then. I just, you know, I'll have a smoke every now and then. I don't really smoke regularly or drink regularly, but like, you know, I'm not like Mr. Perfect clean cut wellness, but I do try to, you know, check all all the boxes that I can around, I go to therapy a lot. I do my yoga, I exercise, I meditate every morning, 30 minutes. I have a lifestyle that is the foundation of it is something that creates that sense of wholeness and well-being. So.
And with that in mind, I'm very excited to welcome on our special guest. He is a body positive fitness coach and thick goddess. Please welcome Roy Belzer. Hi, Roy. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Rob?
Doing well, thanks. So what advice would you give to LGBTQ plus people who are struggling with body image and potentially eating disorders?
Yeah, well, especially when it comes to the holidays, I know so many of us in surrounding ourselves with family this time of year, we do have those, kooky aunts and crazy uncles who will always comment on our bodies and where we're at. And it's hard to just pay them no mind, but remembering that at the end of the day, it is your body that you are living in and they are not is so important. And when it comes to like eating during these times, eat what brings you joy and don't eat past that point because otherwise you're going to be cranky when you're dealing with these idiots. But eat what brings you joy because this is a joyful time for foods. It's a joyful time for coming together around meals. And yeah, just kind of remember that your body is a good body, regardless of where you're at right now. It has been a hard couple of years and our bodies might be in a different place than they've been in the past. And that's okay.
All right, so that is it. The best of guests for 2024. Everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. I think this was a really big year for the podcast. I learned a lot. I connected a lot. While it was busy and sometimes stressful, it ultimately was a great opportunity. So I hope you enjoyed all the episodes and that you learned a lot too, and that you're excited for the year ahead. Like I say all the time, thank you so much for your support. I could not do this without you. And to all my LGBT cuties out there, I hope you have a happy and healthy holiday season. Stay safe, and I will see you in 2025. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 5 stars only. I greatly appreciate it. For any questions or feedback about any episodes, feel free to reach out to me, rob@ajadedgay.com. For more information on episode topics, links to resources, blog posts, merchandise, all that fun stuff, you can visit the website at jadedgay.com. You can also connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, and YouTube at @ajadedgaypod. You can follow me personally, Rob Lovelace, on Instagram at Rob_Lovelace. Also, if you're feeling generous, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That gets you instant access to episodes ad-free, a day early, plus exclusive monthly bonus content. So if the idea of not hearing from me throughout the rest of December and January brings you such sadness, consider joining the Patreon. That way you can hear the bonus episodes for this month and January. Or if you just want to purchase those bonus episodes, you can do so for $3 each. And if you're scared of commitment, don't worry, I get it. You can do a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee for any dollar amount, and both of those are at a Jaded Gay Pod. And remember, every day is all we have, so you got to make your own happiness. Bye.